Hi, I'm Marcus with the IndieMusicLab.com. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to get that 1975 vocal sound on your own mixes, so that you can take your vocal mixes from sounding like this to sounding like this. So I'm going to walk you through everything that is happening on this vocal mix. There are multiple steps involved here, so if you really want to get the most out of it, follow along with your own DAW, with your own vocal for just a song that you have made perhaps in the past, and follow this process. Use this vocal chain, or at least base it on what I'm doing, so that you can really practice and achieve this 1975 sound. That way, you know how to get it when the time comes to use it. And as always, follow along in any DAW. It does not matter. All the concepts do apply. So let's jump right in. Here is how to achieve a 1975 style vocal mix. All right, let's dive right into the mix. This is going to be super fun. You are going to love this process, and you're going to love watching this unfold because it's going to give you some real clarity for how to get this particular type of sound yourself. So the first thing I did here, as you just saw, I turned all the plugins off, turned off all the sends, and we are going to start with the dry sound like this. Super pitchy on the first word there. It's coming in so strong. And then I recovered for line 2. So the first thing that you need to do is, speaking of bad pitch, is you got to use AutoTune and use it boldly. So that's sort of the first step if you're going for this poppy 1975 style of vocal. Do not be ashamed of using AutoTune. So here is the vocal soloed, right? It's coming in so strong. So here is our vocal track, and I got an AutoTune on here, and now it sounds like this. Oh, if you don't stop. Gives us some nice tuning. Now, it isn't, extreme. It's not like this. I'm gonna need a second one. Right, it's not doing that. We want to, still sound at least relatively natural. And so something like this is usually where I like to land with this particular Waves Tune plugin. So that's the first thing. Once you got some basic, tight auto-tune on your vocal, the next thing we want to do is start to do some processing on it. Now, the way that I have this routed, in case you're confused here, is this is the lead vocal track. This purplish pink one right here. Now, this is being sent to the lead vocals bus right here. And then this is where the majority of the plugins are. Now, don't get overwhelmed by the number of these plugins. It all makes sense here in a second. The majority of the value is at the top here. So all the other stuff is kind of like icing, and I will talk about that as well. But again, don't get overwhelmed with the number of plugins on there. Now, the reason I'm routing this way, in case you were curious, is this is my lead vocal. I'm sending it through the lead vocals bus before it goes to the main output. The reason is because I have a couple vocal doubles that I wanted to send through the same bus as well. That way I can process the lead vocal, and then when the chorus comes in, I've got a couple vocal doubles that are layered in, and then I just process them all on the same channel here. That way I don't have to use multiple channels of the same plugins. It's just a much more efficient way to work, and so that is my thought process behind it. But anyway, we've got the tuning, we got step 1. The next step is, what I recommend you do is use an all-in-one vocal plugin. So an example of this is CLA Vocals. JJP Vocals. I have JJP Vocals here, and that's what I'm using. A side note, by the way, I once listened to an interview with the 1975's producer. I think his name is Daniel something, or George Daniel, I forget. Anyway, he was asked, like, what are a couple of your favorite tools in the studio? And one of them was CLA Vocals. So do with that what you like. That probably means that a lot of the 1975's vocals you hear, there is CLA Vocals on that vocal track. Now, you might notice that I have a de-esser on here before it goes into the JJPs, but I'm not going to make a whole, step on de-essing because it's such a basic move, such an obvious move. Just do some de-essing, right? Just Waves de-esser. Use any de-esser you got just to kind of tame that, and I do like to put de-essing at the top of the chain, and then if I need it again, I'll put it at the bottom of the chain as well if I need it. Now, let's actually dive into this step. Step 2 is use an all-in-one vocal plugin. These are super cool because of how quickly you can get a really good, tight, mixed vocal sound. So here's what it sounds like, right? Boom. Here's without it. Here's with it. There's something I've been meaning to. So the big thing that's happening here is it is getting rid of a lot of that mud in the low mid range, right? So if you I just can't do it. Ooh. And it's also adding a bit of presence up in the top end. And so if you have a plugin like JJP Vocals or CLA or whatever, use that and then just mess around with the knobs until you find a sound that's good. All of this is just experimentation. There's no like rule that you have to follow. I'm just giving you what I ended up doing on this track because I think it'll put you in the ballpark. And then from there, it is just up to you to explore and find your own little, your own little cranny of sound that sounds good to you. All right, now step 3 in this process is fix EQ problems on the vocal. So that is what I'm doing here. Now there are a couple specific areas that I diagnosed as problematic in this vocal mix. And this is especially useful for you if you are going for this Sheen 1975 type of mix. I'm always fascinated by the EQ curves of their songs because they often do a lot of cutting up in this range, in the 2K, 3K range on their entire mix. Like if you compare an EQ curve of a song by the 1975, compare it to another song, you'll notice that they have less of that 2K, 3K range. And what that does is it creates a sonic flavor that is a bit less harsh and it's just kind of more in the background. You feel like the song isn't in your face. It's kind of just, it's taken a step back from you. The 2K, 3K range is where you can achieve that. You can either add more of it or you can add less of it. So here's what it sounds like without the EQ. Oh, something I've been meaning to. And now here's with the EQ. Say to you, baby, hold that thought. There's something Do you notice that? It's taking away some of that harsh presence, that in-your-face quality from that you would get from this. Those types of frequencies. Baby, but I just can't do it. And it warms it up, but it's not as much cutting up here. You still hear the crispiness, but it's more in this 2K, 3K range where I definitely recommend you experiment and see if you do, these cuts in this range to see if that can help you get close to this type of sound. And that is what I ended up doing. And I also did a cut at 1K. 1K is often where you get that honky nasal tone. It's a bit different than the 2K, 3K range, but it's often just as problematic, if not more so. And so I'll often make a cut in that range as well. Feel like I can loosen my lips. I could summarize. Cleans it up. That's beautiful. I love that. Now, before we move past step 3, if you want to dive deeper into EQ, I have a free guide that is really going to help you out, and it's my visual guide for fixing vocal EQ problems. So I'll leave a link to that below. So if you want to go beyond what we just talked about and you want a more well-rounded approach to using EQ and using it effectively on your vocals, then be sure to check that out. All right, step number 4 is to add some compression. Now, we've already added some compression in the JJP Vocals plugin because, again, this is like an all-in-one plugin. So this already did add compression to it. But I tried not to go all in, and completely max out the capabilities of this plugin. I just wanted it to feel mixed and to give me a nice mixed sound, which is great, especially for a pop mix. I don't use JJP usually if I'm doing like a folk song or a more chilled out song. But for pop, it's great. I love those types of plugins. However, I did still want to add a bit of compression. And so in this case, I grabbed the analog style compressor here in Studio One. I love this compressor. And it sounds like this. Here's without it. It's simple and it goes like this. It just adds some extra punch to this vocal track. Again, it's another pop thing. Whenever you're doing pop and rock especially, you probably want to add a little bit more compression than you think you might need. And that's compression. Now, step number 5 is one of my favorite steps. This is super fun. And that is you want to add saturation. Now, in this case, I added saturation across 3 different plugins. So I spread out the saturation flavors, if you will, across 3 different plugins. So this is kind of like instead of getting vanilla ice cream or strawberry ice cream, I combined vanilla, strawberry, and raspberry, right? I combined 3 different flavors. That way it creates more of an interesting saturation instead of just using one. But that's not a rule you have to follow. You can just use one, especially if it sounds good, it sounds good. So the first plugin I ended up using here is Red Light Distortion. So here is without it. I'm gonna need a second one. And then here's with it. Oh, there's something I've been meaning to. It's not making a huge difference. It's very subtle, but you can feel the warmth. This is on a soft tube saturation setting here inside this stock distortion plugin. This is just a basic plugin, and it's giving me a nice sort of vintage retro saturated sound. And then continuing on this theme of saturation, I added a little bit of saturation knob. Say to you, baby, hold that thought, there's something I... And again, it's not doing much. It's just giving me some of that saturated vibe, which is super important, especially in the digital age where we're recording everything digitally. Adding back in some of those saturated analog tape qualities is just, generally speaking, a great move to warm up your vocals and just make them sound better. And then finally, the third addition in this saturation chain is RC20. It's my favorite plugin. I ended up just using the distortion feature here. I turned everything else off and I just cranked this tube distortion here. Just without it. Just with it. Baby, and now, sure, it's turning up the volume a little bit as well. And those of you out there who are very nerdy about gain staging, you're probably hating my guts right now, but I don't care. I'm not that obsessed with gain staging. As long as I don't clip and as long as I'm mixing at a low enough volume overall, I don't care if I add volume on my chain. So that is saturation. Super important. It adds so much. So now let me actually turn all three of these saturation plugins off. And here's before. It's coming in so strong. And then here is after. Oh, if you don't stop. Oh, it adds that meat. It adds that grit to it. Absolutely love it. Now, the rest of these, I don't think I really need to get into because it's just very subtle stuff. Like on this EQ, I did a little bit of work in, super highs. On the super lows, I made a little bit of a boost to warm it up. Nothing crazy. Mix tool is just for volume automation so that I could turn it up. I think when the chorus hits, I made the volume be a little louder. Ozone Imager, I experimented with this, but I remember actually I ended up not using it. So I ended up turning it off. So we don't actually need that. And then I added a de-esser at the end of this chain. So that's often the standard is I'll add a de-esser at the front and then at the end of the chain as well. And now let's get into I think it's step 6, right? Where are we at here? Yes, step 6 is you want to add a metallic-y plate reverb effect. And I'm using that word metallic very intentionally because that's kind of the sound you hear with the 1975 and their reverbs. So listen to this reverb sound that we have here. I'm gonna need a second one. Oh, there's something I've been meaning to say to you, baby, hold that thought. There's something there's without it. There's with it. Meaning to say. It's that crispy, that sheen type of reverb. And it's not that hard to get it. You can use this with you can probably get this sound with a stock reverb, to be honest with you. In this case, I'm using my favorite reverb plugin, that's Valhalla. And I went with a plate second, just over 1 second decay time. And then I made sure that the high cut isn't too low because we want to hear those high frequencies. And it's a pretty standard setting, plate reverb. And then I did make some adjustments on EQ though, because notice here how this is sort of mirroring what I talked about earlier with those harsh frequencies with mixes by the 1975. And so I wanted to cut away some of this 3, 4, 5K range on just this reverb channel. We're using a return track here. This isn't directly inserted onto the reverb. This is a return track and we're sending the lead vocals over here. We're sending it using a send here to that plate reverb. So that is what's happening. And then I'm adding this EQ plugin to this reverb channel so that the reverb sound itself, this is the EQ settings on just the reverb channel. And then, is there anything else on this? No, because I ended up turning off. I did try it with OTT, which I often like to do. Baby, but I just can't do it. But I ended up thinking that it sounded better without OTT on it. And so that's all we're doing. It's just a very shorter plate reverb with some EQ that accentuates this crispy high end that doesn't have too much harshness. And that gives us that sheenness, and also removed a bunch of low end because you don't need that on the reverb channel. So if we come back here again and we listen to it without the reverb,
moving in, feel like I can loosen my lips.
Beautiful, right? Huge part of this sound is that metallic-y plate reverb effect. And then step number 7 is a slapback delay. Just a nice, good old slapback. Let me turn off the plate reverb so we can hear it. We'll get into this quarter note delay here in a second because I got some special sauce on that one. But we have the slap delay here.
Oh, there's something
which sounds like this. So very basic slap delay. Left and right, slightly offset. I talk about this all the time. In this case, I turned up the feedback a little bit so you get a nice springy effect on this. Sounds really cool, right? So you get that nice spring effect at the end with this super fast slap delay effect. And then, just like we did on the reverb, I went in and EQ'd this specific effect so that this delay channel has its own EQ curve. And again, I didn't want too much of these frequencies to pop through on that delay return track. So let's put this back at 0. And I forgot to put the reverb back at 0. So that would be bad. And so that's the slap delay. Coming in at number 8 is you want to add some type of automated delay that creates like a delay throw effect. And here's what I mean. Listen to, I have to turn this back up here. Listen to what this delay sounds like. Let me turn it up so you can really hear it. Listen for that delay. Very obvious there, right?
It's coming in so strong.
But you notice how it is not present. You only hear it on the last word of those phrases. And that is very intentionally done because otherwise it would sound too muddied. It would run over that lead vocal and it just doesn't really add value if the delay is present the whole time. So what I did here is I used a simple automation. So we're sending the lead vocal to this quarter note delay, just like we're sending the vocal to that plate reverb and that slap delay. We're sending it to this quarter note delay, which has Valhalla delay on it, just a quarter note. You know, it's nothing crazy happening here. And then on this delay channel, I did want to make that delay a bit more washy and spread out and spacey. So I added a reverb so that the delay signal itself gets a bit spread out. And then here I did end up using the OTT plugin with the depth at about 23% so that it can really sort of cut through the mix a bit better. And then I'm sending the lead vocal to it. But again, we're using automation. So let me show you very quickly. This is what it looks like in Studio One. It might, look a little bit different, but every DAW can do automation. So in this case, I clicked here on this power button to send the vocal to that delay. And then when I click that, it popped up here, send, mute. I hit A, and that created an automation lane. And then here, since I already did this automation, it shows up here. So when the vocal is singing here, when the line is up here, that delay send is muted. And then when the line comes down here, you hear the delay. So listen to how it's set up here.
Heartbeat.
No delay.
So strong.
On the word strong, it's turned on.
Oh, if you don't stop.
Beautiful, right? That is the automated delay, and it just sounds so clean because, again, it's not active the whole time. It is only active on specific words, specifically at the end of those phrases. Now, another thing that I should mention about this quarter note delay is depending on the delay that you're using, it might sound too crispy and bright. So make sure that you are aware of that. And if you need to, just roll off the highs. In this case, I rolled everything, on the high cut here inside of this delay plugin. It's at about 6K. I rolled everything down from there, but every delay is going to sound a little bit different, and it'll just depend on what your chain looks like. So if your delay sounds too intrusive and sounds too upfront, one of the best ways is to simply grab, and this is, by the way, what it looks like if you're doing it. Just this is all you're doing. You're removing those super high frequencies. That way they're not super sparkly, but they've got that blanketed warm feel to it, which sounds awesome, especially for those types of delay throws. All right, so those are the 8 steps. Now, I'm going to throw in a nice little bonus step here, which is I'm just going to walk you through all the other vocal tracks that are not the lead vocal. And I'm just going to make this super quick. The first thing is what I'm going to call the Maddie Healy vocal track, the Ad-Lib. And it sounds like this.
Yeah.
right? Just that type of thing, right? Maddie loves doing that.
Oh, if you don't stop,
And like, is it over here? I think?
I'm in love with you. Goes like, I'm in love with you.
Right, I wanted it to feel like I was in a room, kind of raw, and just layered it in there with that lead vocal. And then, is it over here where it's that? Oh, here. That little, it's these types of things, right? It adds so much life and energy to it. And this is one of those things where you just kind of have to start the song. You got to play around. You got to record some ad-libs. And especially the first time you do it, the majority of it's probably not going to sound very good. And this is going to take practice. It's going to take just kind of going through the song a couple times, getting those ad-libs in. And then as far as processing them, you know, this is where you're completely free to experiment because it's not the lead vocal. You don't need to be as rigid as you might be on the lead vocal. You can just do some crazy things. And I just have a basic compressor on there to tame those loud parts. And then here we have in ambience mode, Valhalla Vintage Verb, just like a short vocal ambience preset. And then I messed around with the mix knob until I thought it sounded good. And then some EQ to get rid of a bunch of low end since we don't need it. And then as you can see, we're sending this to the slap delay as well, which we already talked about. So we got some ad-libs there. Then we got these two double tracks, which are only present here.
Baby, hold that thought.
Right at that accented line.
Baby, hold that thought. There's something
And then they don't come in again until the chorus is when I just bring them in.
like this. I'm in love with you.
What is this? Is this a mistake?
It's like,
Yeah, that's not technically, although I think it sounds, I think it sounds good there. Because if you listen to it,
and it goes like this.
yeah, it doesn't distract from it. So I'm just going to leave that little thing in there that I forgot to edit out because it sounds fine.
And it goes like this. I'm in love with you. I'm in love with you.
So these doubles are very subtle. You don't really hear them until I solo them, right? But they add thickness to the overall vocal sound and they help give the chorus that lift. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm sending those doubles to the exact same lead vocal bus as the lead vocal is. So they're going through the exact same processing as I just walk you through. And as far as the EQ on the individual doubles, I did some work, right? Scooped out a bunch of that low mid range, scooped out some high end. That way they can sort of just sit behind the lead vocal and so in a supporting role. And you don't want a bunch of low frequencies, and you also don't want a bunch of high frequencies, you know, and those harsh kind of in your face qualities, because you want the lead vocal to take that spotlight or to shine in that spotlight. So those are the two doubles. And then a couple other tracks. It's these 4 tracks, these chant tracks in the chorus, right? It's that. So I'm just doing 4 takes, panning 100 left, 50 right, 100 right. Oh, 97 right. Oh no. All right, let's make sure that's all the way right. Super important. And then we got the chants bus. So I'm sending all of these. I just threw some quick AutoTune on there just so it's nice and tight. A bit of compression just to tame volume. Fast tack, fast release, just basic stuff. Just to tame the volume on these tracks before I send them to the bus. And then I'm taking the approach of using an all-in-one plugin on this bus to process this all those 4 tracks that are going through it. And we're focusing in on specifically the high frequencies and adding some nice reverb to this. So we have JJP, Valhalla Vintage Verb, a bit of distortion, like saturation added to it as well. Wait, what's going on here? Don't do that. No. Don't do that. Oh, come on here. Okay, get back in your place. All right, and then finally EQ, but that's not doing much at all. So those are the chants, right? So here's what it sounds like, right, before we added the plugins. So we're adding a lot of that sheeness, that reverb, that crispiness, and a lot of that is, again, in the JJP vocals, all in one plugin, focusing on adding that presence and that high end. And that, my friend, is the vocal arrangement, and that is how I produced and mixed this vocal remake in this song by the 1975. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to dive deeper into vocal EQ, like I mentioned earlier, go download my free guide. It's a visual guide for fixing vocal EQ problems. This is going to help you out so much to get a clear understanding of what EQ is supposed to do on your vocals, and it'll help you to actually fix the problems so that you're not making 37 random moves on your EQ. You thought I was going to say 27, didn't you? And because that's usually what I say. All right, thank you so much for watching this video, my friend. I will see you in the next one.